The shuttle descended through clouds that shimmered like crushed pearls, and through the viewport she watched the palace rise from the valley flora, structure of black stone and silver light that seemed to breathe. The Keith homeworld smelled of ozone and something floral she couldn't name. Her fingers trembled against the armrest. 3 months of preparation, and still she felt impossibly small. The listener, they called her. Not a name, but a designation. She was the first human permitted within the inner sanctum in 2 centuries. Sent to teach their young the human concept of play, a word that didn't translate properly into their clicking, harmonic language. The Keith, massive beings with iridescent scales and eyes like molten copper, moved through corridors with the weight of mountains. Their guards wore armor that sang when they walked, each plate resonating with the others, creating music from movement. She was led through halls where bioluminescent vines crawled across ceilings, pulsing in patterns she suspected were language. The royal chamberlain, a towering figure whose crest flared with colors that hurt to look at, directly stopped before massive doors carved with star maps. The cubs are within. You will teach. You will not touch. You will not approach closer than 3 body lengths. You will not. The list went on. She nodded to each prohibition, her throat tight. Through the doors, she heard chittering, high and curious. The cubs were smaller than she'd expected, only twice her size, their scales still soft and opalescent. They watched her from a nest of heated stones, heads tilted, crests barely developed. One made a sound like wind through crystals. She sat down against protocol and began to hum. Not words, just sound. The cubs shifted. The guards at the door stiffened, hands moving toward weapons that looked like they could unmake atoms. Days blended together in that room of stone and light. She brought toys from Earth's simple things, balls and puzzles, and the cubs approached inch by inch, session by session. She learned their sounds meant curiosity, excitement, fear. They learned her laughter meant safety. The guards watched everything, their faces unreadable behind ceremonial masks that covered all but their eyes. Those eyes tracked her every movement like targeting systems. On the 7th day, the smallest cub, the one with a birthmark like a nebula across its flank, crept close enough to touch her boot. The temperature in the room dropped. She felt the guard's attention like physical weight. She stayed perfectly still. The cub chirped, nudged her boot again, then scurried back to its siblings. When she looked up, one guard had his hand pressed flat against the wall, claws extended, digging into stone. She started sitting closer. The prohibitions hadn't explicitly forbidden the cubs from approaching her. She brought fabrics from Earth and built them a fort, showed them how to hide inside, how to jump out roaring. The cubs loved it. They wrestled with the cloth, tangled themselves, thrilled with what could only be joy. She found herself laughing until tears ran down her face. When she looked up, 3 guards had turned away from their posts, watching. One's shoulders shook. The chamberlain came on the 14th day. "You are teaching them weakness," he said, his voice like grinding glaciers. She stood her ground. "I'm teaching them trust." His crest flared dark crimson. Trust is what killed the last diplomat. He left without explanation, but she saw it in the guard's eyes afterward, memory, and something like shame. That night, research from her own people came through on the quantum link. The previous human envoy had been murdered by extremists who believed contact with soft species would corrupt Keith purity. The cub's parents had executed the killers personally, then opened the door for another human to come, to prove something, to change something. She sat in her quarters, staring at the message until the words blurred. The next day, the largest cub brought her a stone. Smooth, black, warm. It pressed the stone into her palm with its snout, then sat back, waiting. She understood a gift, mirroring her toys. She pressed her forehead to the stone, then to the cub's scaled brow. The room went silent. Even the bioluminescent vines seemed to still. A guard made a sound she'd never heard before, guttural and breaking. After that, the cubs brought her into their games. They chased her gently, so gently around the room. They let her climb on their backs. The smallest one started sleeping with its head near her chair during rest periods. She'd reach down and trace the patterns of its scales, humming earth songs. The guards changed shifts in complete silence now, their resonant armor muted, as if they feared breaking something precious. She didn't notice when exhaustion caught her. She'd been up 3 cycles straight, coordinating reports, studying Keith's developmental psychology, preparing new activities. She sat down next to the cub's sleeping nest during their rest period, intending to observe. The stones were warm. The smallest cub shifted closer, and she absently stroked its crest. Her eyes closed just for a moment. She woke to absolute silence. Wrong silence. The kind that pressed against eardrums. She opened her eyes slowly and found herself curled between all three cubs, their bodies arranged around her like petals around a flower's heart, their breathing synchronized with hers. They'd moved in sleep, seeking her warmth, and she'd unconsciously curled into their protection. Then she saw the guards, 12 of them, the elite detail, in full ceremonial armor, weapons drawn, positioned in a semicircle around the nest, not moving, not breathing, and crying. Silent tears tracking down scaled faces, catching light like falling stars. Their crests were fully extended, showing colors she'd never seen: pale gold, soft violet, shimmering white, vulnerability colors, grief colors, joy colors. The commander stood at the front, a scarred veteran whose name she'd learned meant last standing shield. His weapon was pointed at the ground. His whole body shook. When he spoke, his voice fractured. "You did not know. You could not have known." She stayed frozen, afraid any movement would shatter whatever was happening. The smallest cub stirred, chirped softly, nuzzled deeper against her side. The commander's weapon clattered to the floor. Several guards sank to their knees, foreheads pressed to stone. "No one touches the royal young," last standing shield said. "No one approaches without ceremony. No one ... double quotes. His crest flared through a spectrum of colors. "No one sleeps in their presence. To sleep is to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable near the heirs is to declare absolute trust. And they ... He gestured with a shaking hand at the cubs. "They formed the guardian circle around you, as they would for their own mother." She finally understood what she'd done. In a culture where vigilance meant survival, where trust was earned over decades, where the royal young were protected behind protocols that spanned generations, she'd simply fallen asleep, and the cubs had chosen her as pack. "We came expecting disaster," another guard said, his voice wet. "We came ready to extract them from danger. We came to ... double quotes." He couldn't finish. The largest cub raised its head, looked at the guards, and made a deep, resonant sound. She felt it in her chest, a sound of contentment, of safety, of home. Every guard shuddered. Last standing shield approached slowly, his movements careful. He knelt at the edge of the nest. "They have not circled anyone since their birth mother passed 2 cycles ago. They would not circle their father. They would not circle the chamberlain. They would not circle us." His copper eyes met hers. "The human, the listener, who brings soft things and strange sounds, who laughs with them, who ... His voice broke completely. "Who they chose." She felt the weight of it settling. This accident that had become something monumental. The cubs stirred, beginning to wake. The smallest one licked her hand with a tongue like warm velvet. The guards watched this simple gesture, as if witnessing the birth of stars. "What happens now?" she whispered. Last standing shields. Crest shifted to deep blue determination. Now everything changes. This moment will be recorded in the imperial annals. Artists will render it in crystal. Children will learn this story for generations." He stood, and the other guards rose with him. The human who fell asleep, the cubs who built a circle. The day protocol meant less than trust. The chamberlain arrived within the hour, summoned by guards who could barely form words. He stood in the doorway, watching her sit among the cubs who now refused to let her leave their nest, and his crest went through colors she needed a database to interpret. Finally, he spoke. "The emperor is coming. The empress, the entire court." He paused. "They need to see what we have seen." The cubs turned it into a game, of course. They brought her more stones, proudly displaying them to the gathering crowd of officials who filed in, silent and staring. The largest cub insisted on draping itself across her lap, too big for the gesture but trying anyway. The smallest one chirped and brought her a toy she'd made, a fabric ball, Earth style. She threw it. The cub bounded after it and brought it back. The guards lined the walls, no longer hiding their tears. When the emperor arrived, massive and ancient, scales like midnight studded with silver, the room felt too small. The empress beside him, graceful and terrifying, her crest a crown of light. They stopped at the nest's edge. The cubs scrambled toward them, trilling, then turned back to her, calling, wanting her to come meet their parents properly. She stood on shaking legs, The smallest cub positioned itself between her and the imperial couple, not as barrier but as bridge. The emperor made a sound like thunder rolling through canyons. The empress responded with wind through crystal. Then, slowly, they both lowered themselves to the ground, pressing their crests flat, the kith gesture of complete equality. "You did not know our ways," the emperor said. "Perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps knowing would have made you afraid to give what they needed most." His eyes, ancient beyond measure, softened. They had forgotten how to play, how to trust. They were being raised to survive, not to live. "And you, .. He reached out one massive claw and gently touched her shoulder. "You fell asleep." The empress's crest shimmered. "Let it be known. Let it be law. The human, the listener, is granted the title of cubkeeper. She walks where she wishes. She sleeps where she rests. And anyone who questions this answers to me." Her voice could have shattered planets. Several officials fled. The political shift happened faster than anyone predicted. Within a week, 3 other species requested human envoys. Within a month, the Keith opened their military academies to cross-species training. The image captured by security systems and released by imperial decree of her asleep in the nest, cubs circled around her, guards weeping in the background, became the most transmitted image in the known galaxy. She stayed. The cubs needed her. She needed them. She taught them games and stories, hopes and dreams. They taught her their language, their history, their fears. The guards became her friends, last standing shield especially. He told her one night, voice rough, "I have killed in defense of those cubs. I was prepared to die for them, but I never knew peace until I saw them sleeping with you." Ambassadors came to study the phenomenon. Xenopsychologists wrote papers. Artists across 100 worlds created works inspired by the moment. But in the palace, in the room with heated stones and bioluminescent light, it was simple. She was their listener. They were her cubs. The guards watched over all of them with tears, always close. On the day the cubs were old enough for their presentation ceremony, when they would be formally introduced to the galaxy as heirs, they refused to participate unless she walked with them. The protocol masters argued. The empress silenced them with a look, so she stood between the 3 young Keith, wearing clothes that were neither human nor Keith, but something new, and walked into the grand hall where 10,000 beings watched. The cubs held their heads high, proud and strong, and the elite guard detail formed around them, not in standard formation, but something new. They walked as witnesses, as honor guard to something unprecedented. Last standing shield walked closest, his crest showing colors that meant joy, peace, hope. She had just fallen asleep, but to them it was a declaration that the universe could be softer than they'd known. The cubs had chosen, and the guards could only cry. She did not know they had never allowed anyone that close. But now, walking through light and ceremony, she understood that some barriers weren't meant to be negotiated away. They were meant to be dreamed through, one nap at a time.